Twitter X is not a content site like TikTok or Instagram. It's a networking site. Centrists can be very passionate about the ideas that we have. We just don't necessarily conform to a certain wing, right? So we have a legacy, and it's a powerful one, and we get to create it, and we get to start it.
There's such important lessons that a father passes on, and Dustin, it's clear to me that they never taught you how to shave this part of your face. We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
Welcome back to Elevated Thoughts, and we could not be more excited to have Dustin the Dad, Dustin Burnham, joining us, and one of the co-hosts of the Present Fathers podcasts. Dustin, thanks for coming on. How are you, brother?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me. I have a little girl. I'm officially a girl dad, so I'm beyond excited. It's a big day, and it all went well. I didn't know if it was going to. It was a little scary yesterday. She came about 8 weeks early, but mom is doing great. Our daughter's doing great, so we're winning. It's all good.
Heck yeah, that's what I love to hear.
Congratulations, dude. Congratulations to you, the family. I know you've got one other son, so a growing family. Congratulations. So exciting. Mike and I are both new fathers. My son just turned 1. Mike, how old is yours again?
Just coming on 7 weeks soon now. I can't believe it's almost 2 months right now. Yeah.
So things are plugging along, but that's why we wanted to bring Dustin on today, because you have set the example and, in fact, a very high bar of bringing dads together and imparting this important messaging on guys like us that we're going through this for the first time. Obviously, it's somewhere that you've been for a few years now, and getting together and building this community of other dads. Tell us a little bit about the podcast, its mission, and what your experiences have been.
Thanks. Yeah, so I host the Present Fathers podcast along with 3 good friends. So you've met all of them, and it is a game changer. We've had about 100 episodes where we interview the smartest dads, sometimes moms and different people, but mostly dads. We like to highlight them. Everything from CEOs to guys who have seen active duty as Green Berets, and to take those skills and transfer them to being the best dad that you can be has really taught me so much. And a lot of it is seeing what good dads don't do. That's a big one, right? So I talk to all these dads, and there's certain things they don't do, right? And so that's really a nice razor for me. It's sometimes hard to see when things go well, why it's going well. But when you see what people aren't doing, you can put that together and realize, all right, the good dads, here's what they're not doing. And the not so good dads that need some work, here's what they are doing, and here's how we fix it. So that's just been really huge, learning from these guys, getting this information out there. And our goal is to give dads the tools to be the best dads that we can be. There's not a lot of great tools out there. There's a lot of confusing messaging. And our goal is to really be as clear as possible about how to get there and how to be a great dad.
100%. There's so much messaging out there, and I've seen it with my wife and looking up all of this stuff every single day more and more. And I'm so grateful for it because she really took the lead on a lot of this. But then I look back and I go, wait a minute, I need to also take the lead on a lot of this stuff. And having that way that men communicate, right? And actually podcasts has really been one of those ways. It's been personally a great resource for me. I listened to the Save Your Sons gentleman on your episode, and that one was really awesome. I had followed him, so it was really cool to see someone who come out from behind a profile on social media, right? And share some of these tips and how to apply them in real life. It's been really cool. But Dustin, one of the things that we talked about, and we actually became friends through X and Twitter, and we've gone on to meet in real life now and talk and communicate on the phone and not through the app. That's kind of cool.
But one of the things that SpaceX launched together recently, actually.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
absolutely. We go to rocket launches with our kids and our families. Like, come on, this is a real thing now. But one of the things that we talked about was legacy and what legacy means to you or to any dad. And that was such a cool conversation where we were able to explore the ways that some people have these traditions, they want to keep them going. Many people don't have traditions, and they have to start them themselves. So when you hear the word legacy, what does that mean to you?
So I did not have a dad around growing up, so I didn't necessarily have a legacy that was baked in. I have a lot of family traditions, and I'm very close to a lot of my family, but there wasn't a straightforward legacy that was handed to me. So I spoke to a gentleman named Nick Freitas, who I asked him, same thing, single father. He had a single mom. And I asked him, what does legacy mean to you? What do we do to create a legacy? And something he said that was really powerful to me was that you still have a legacy. It just begins with you. And that really hit me hard, right? So we have a legacy, and it's a powerful one, and we get to create it, and we get to start it. So, you feel bad. I mean, I also feel bad for some guys who have 1,000 years of legacy. My father was the chieftain, and then his father, and so you have to do this. We don't have that pressure. We can read the books we want to read. We can talk to the other dads and moms that we want to talk to and create our own legacy. And that's a big part of this podcast. One of my fellow podcasters, Brandon Blinson, made a good point. He said, even if nobody watches our podcast, our kids and our grandkids will have it. They can go to YouTube and say, what was Dustin like, when he was 40? He had that weird stash. He was telling bad jokes. He was making images with Midjourney that was a combination of Star Wars and Game of Thrones. Like, what a weirdo, right?
He was recording online with the day after his daughter was born.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so being able to create that legacy ourselves is really powerful. So it really is up to you what kind of legacy you want to have. And for me, legacy is all about, one, helping other dads. That's a really big one for me, knowing that I can help give them some of the tools that I didn't have. And giving my son those tools as well is very healing for me. Every day that I spend with my son and I show him how to read and I teach him how to do things, those things my dad wasn't able to do for me, a little piece of me inside heals every time I give him those skills. So that's a big part of the legacy that I want to have.
There's such important lessons that a father passes on. And Dustin, it's clear to me that they never taught you how to shave this part of your face. But tying your shoes in a tie, I'm sure you have that down by now. Listen, we've had a lot of fun on this podcast as well, and I think when you focus on the mission in that way, you forget about the struggles of the growth and, oh, nobody's watching, or, oh, we just did this and it was a big waste of time. You go through and learn the process, and when you have a group of guys like you do, really, anyone who's listening, go check out Present Fathers podcast, because it is a group of great guys, and you'll take away a lot, especially if you're a father or a new father, or even a new mother or a new parent. So it's been really awesome. Mike, has there been anything that you've taken away or things that you've been curious about as a new dad?
So a phrase that really began to speak to me was, you are a reflection of the people you surround yourself with. And not that my dad wasn't a good dad, but a lot of our generation, sorry to hear that yours wasn't in the picture, but unfortunately for a lot of us too, dad had to go to work at the crack of dawn and didn't come home till a lot of the time until you were ready to go to bed for the most part. So it's like very challenging to have that relationship early on with your father. And I thought, I get the privilege, I work remotely, I get the privilege of being with my son, so I can't express the gratitude that I have, but it's also a challenge because it's, what legacy do I have? Because I didn't exactly have a ton of early childhood memories. My dad was out busting his hump all day and all night and stuff like that, but I try to remember now, what am I going to do a little bit differently? And that's why I like, surrounding myself with dads who are not humble, are humble, and they learn from their mistakes, right? And they're very open to share about them, so it lets me benefit from their mistakes. So I make a few less of my own, but plenty of mine to make. Don't worry, don't you worry about that. But I have to say, what I love most is just you're a guy who doesn't fit the mold, and I love that your non-linear kind of career path that brought you to here today. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of the background about the gator hunting Dustin, former CrossFit trainer, now anesthetist full time, and the podcaster when he has a few moments to spare during the day. That's what I'd love to hear about. Tell us a little bit more about your spare time.
I read somewhere that if a man isn't reinventing himself every decade, you're really not growing and you're kind of stagnating, right?
I love that. Yeah.
I like the idea. Yeah. So I like the idea of, looking at your life in decades and saying, okay, what were my teens, what were my 20s, my 30s, et cetera. And if you can have an era of your life where you're really accomplishing something and then use that as a stepping stone to then move into the next era, that to me feels like growth and opportunity. Whereas if you're the high school hero who's still talking about that touchdown pass you threw when you were 17, man, if you're 60, you gotta have a different hobby, move on.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's great to do things when you're young, but I think it's really important to stretch ourselves as dads. And my son is very different from me. He doesn't seem to like a lot of the things that I do, which initially was a little frustrating. Why don't you like pickleball and all these things that I'm doing? And then I realized it's this opportunity for me to grow and get into his stuff and learn from him. And if he was the spitting image of me and just did everything that I did, I wouldn't be growing. And so this is an opportunity for me to learn about him. So I started off, I Went to college thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I shadowed in some law firms, and I thought I had narcolepsy. I kept falling asleep at the desk. Like I had drool on my face, and I was really worried and thought there's something wrong with me. And then I realized I just don't want to be a lawyer. That sounds terrible. Right. So I quickly audibled. All my college prep was for that. I was in the gym all the time. I loved it, and so I became a personal trainer. Did that for about 10 years. Taught tennis as well. I was a tennis pro. I taught yoga. I used that to go to resorts all throughout the Caribbean, Mexico, and they would cover your resort expenses. I learned to scuba dive in Jamaica. Yeah, man, no problem. You know, don't smoke the blunt the day of. You know,
yeah, exactly.
They were wonderful. Yeah, so that was my 20s was all about fitness and health. Now it's more like fitting this cookie in my mouth, but I used to be in shape for a long time. It was really cool. So that was my big thing. I did CrossFit competitions, all that stuff, all throughout my 20s. Then I realized that I wanted to, again, challenge myself, do something different. I had met my wife, and so in my 30s, that was all about medicine and anesthesia and becoming the best that I could be in that realm. And I love that. I'm a professor of anesthesia. I absolutely love taking care of patients. It's a real joy for me. And then after we had my son and now our daughter, it's just been all about creativity, being the best father that I can be. This is art to me. You know, I mean, getting on a podcast, talking to you guys, creating the clips, all that kind of stuff. This is me finally getting to be an artiste, you know, as I've always wanted.
Ooh, so, la, la. Yeah, we're finding the same. It's definitely an outlet. And, well, our show is a political show, right? So if nothing else, Mike and I get to have these conversations and spare our wives and families and maybe eventually kids for a few years of these conversations coming out at home, because we're able to kind of share our ideas and share our kind of positions and figure out what we really think by finding common ground. Now, when we talk about politics, it's not common what Mike and I do. That whole discussion thing and staying friends even though we believe different things. And that's one of the things that I wanted to get into with you, Dustin, is how do you foster at home when, and actually, I don't know if we mentioned you're in Florida, right? So Florida has become a politicized state to the right. And now we hear our Democratic government saying that the right-wing extremists are ruining this country. And you hear your governor being called Death Santis. Well, I've been to Florida plenty of times. The people there are actually quite lovely, in my opinion. I live in Connecticut, a deeply blue state. But my point is, it's a very tumultuous political climate. And I'm curious, how do you cultivate a loving, caring neighborhood, right, in your community to make sure that your kids don't fall victim to this kind of two extremist sides where there's nobody in the middle anymore?
It's a real challenge. And part of that is understanding that certain topics with certain people are off limits. I completely understand that there are hot buttons. For certain people, there's a red line, right? Putin doesn't want you putting Ukraine in NATO, and my neighbor doesn't want to talk about abortion, right? It's the same thing.
Right.
Like you don't cross that red line, or there might be some nukes. Yeah. So, you have to tread carefully around those certain issues, and that's okay, right? You don't have to agree on 15 different issues, but if you can find two that you can talk about and have a healthy conversation around, then you can still be friends and still have these, pretty intense conversations. I came across the concept of radical centrism a couple years ago, and it really appealed to me. We have this idea, especially on Twitter, where you can be a hardcore right-winger, you can be a hardcore left-winger, but you can't be a hardcore centrist, right? Why would you be a centrist? You just wishy-washy and don't care, right? That's all that centrists are. I don't believe that at all. I think that centrists can be very passionate about the ideas that we have. We just don't necessarily conform to a certain wing. I'm a big believer if you think everything that your party does is correct, you're probably just not paying attention, right? I mean, there has to be a couple things where you say, I mostly like this platform, but there's a couple things that don't make sense to me. And then you have to look at the other side and say, I don't like most of this, but here's a couple things that I'm like, that actually makes sense. Gavin Newsom came out last week and got rid of legacies in California. Amazing, right? I'm not like a huge Gavin Newsom fan, but I posted that. I was like, dude is a legend. You no longer get any legacy benefits at Stanford or Cal Berkeley, any of that kind of stuff. And I got flamed like crazy, like, oh, Newsom, he sucks, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, he does kind of suck, but that's awesome. And I don't care who he is. That's a good idea. So it's really important to be able to analyze things from first principles, and whether or not you like a candidate should not have anything to do with whether you support their ideas. So that's what a radical centrist is someone who's I'm super passionate about getting rid of legacy, right? I didn't have a dad that was like, oh, I got into this college, so you get an advantage. So I naturally get a little annoyed when I'm like, oh, you got into college because your uncle went there? That's bullshit. I don't like that at all. So if we get rid of that, I'm a huge fan. So, if that makes, a single issue, and if a Republican came out and agreed with that as well, I'd like their idea too. So it doesn't matter to me who the face behind it is, even if it is that luscious, beautiful hair, that he has.
When you touch it goes dong, dong, dong. It's rock hard like steel.
Seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Waxed.
Having monolithic thought in your party is the hardest and worst curse that these parties experience, and it has led to the polarization. In fact, that's something that I'm experiencing on X. Dustin, one of the other reasons I want to bring you on here, you're one of the most engaging and engaged people on that whole app. I think that if you ask people with 500,000 followers and you go, oh yeah, Dustin the Dad, I know this guy. So you're a little bit of a micro celebrity. Where I'm going is I see all the time that profiles left and right will have flags or emojis or titles in their profile. And one of my favorite things to do lately is piss off my followers. In fact, what I'll do is I'll post things that I know they're going to hate. I'm not a typical Republican, but boy, do I love Mao Zedong, right? Or I don't believe Ray Epps is a Fed. I believe he was just a concerned citizen. Or why can't we have women get an abortion at 14 weeks? Truth be told, those are all things that I actually kind of believe. Yes, the Maoism part too. And the truth is that, right, you kind of have to break from the party. When I see someone that has that, I set a preconceived notion, which is probably bad, but I then treat that person in a certain way. So being discerning, being pragmatic, it's really important. And radical centrism, I don't think I'd ever heard that before. That's really kind of interesting. Mike, had you heard radical centrism?
No, but I like how you can be unpredictable. There's nothing more boring than being able, I forget what it is, I could ask you 2 or 3 questions, and depending on how you answer them, I know everything about your political beliefs and the people who you hang out with, stuff like that. That's boring, right? Like, variety is the spice of life, and it's just, it's a shame how everyone either toes the party line or they hold everyone to some sort of litmus test as like, oh, do you believe this, this, and this? Well, if not, then we can't be friends, So it's really a shame, but I've always appreciated your ability to create communities. You have like half a dozen communities that I know about, and that's just the ones I've been lucky to have been invited to on Twitter alone, but also what you do outside of that space. So thank you for that, what you do.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I mean, someone I like and respect a lot, Dino, he runs Masterclass. One of my favorite phrases that I've heard from him is Twitter X is not a content site like TikTok or Instagram. It's a networking site. Even more so than LinkedIn is. So if you're on Twitter and you're scrolling to read threads or watch videos, you're doing it wrong. The whole point of Twitter is to make friends and meet the most interesting people in the world, right? I mean, we can talk to CEOs, we can talk to people developing large language models, and we can argue with them and be like, I think this is a bad idea, and they'll talk back to us. It's wild that we can do that. Try doing that on Instagram. That would never happen.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Actually, Mike, you will love this. And it's to Dustin's point. My mom was begging me to watch From Russia with Lev, the Lev Parnas movie. And I told her, absolutely not. I go, I've spoken with Lev Parnas. And it happened to be in a Twitter space, right? So it's kind of that way in. Like I've interviewed and asked a question to Andrew Yang on Twitter, just out of the blue, right? Clicking random buttons and there you are. So it's a really small world. In fact, I think I'm going to delete my LinkedIn because no one goes on that site anymore. Why would you, right?
Yeah, for real. It's so spammy at this point now.
So, Dustin, when we talk about your podcast and we talk about your mission statement and we talk about trying to push these positive ideals, right? Do you have a mission that is also to grow on social media and become an influencer? That's something that, I'll be honest, I have that ambition. I want to grow a following. I want to have a message that I can push out there and a platform and a community. Is that something that is important to you, or are you 100% mission critical focused?
Another guy that I respect a lot and have had a chance to chat with extensively, Zuby. If you haven't listened to his music, probably the best rapper in the world. He's absolutely the most talented, incredible man, and Oxford trained, just brilliant. He tweeted last year that he thinks 95% of people cannot handle a large social media presence. And probably 80% of people can't handle a small but significant social media presence. And I read that and I thought about it. And he's absolutely right. It requires a very special kind of person. You see the burnout all the time. You see these big accounts who out of nowhere have a mental health issue and they're gone. And then and you're like, well, that's weird, right? I mean, they have this big platform. It seems like everything's fine. It gets to your head. It's really, really challenging. It's a Pandora's box that you open once you have a large platform. So if I'm part of that 5% that really could handle a large social media presence, then yes, I think I have a lot to offer. I'm not convinced I'm part of that 5%. I'm kind of a sensitive dude. I spent most of the past day crying, when I met my daughter. It's just kind of part of who I am. When people say mean things to me on Twitter, it hurts my feelings. I read it. I'm kind of like, why would you say that? I'm a nice guy.
Well, as we've been starting our YouTube channel and trying to gain traction, it's one thing I heard, and it was from Ali Abdal, who's a YouTuber and does business and productivity tips. But he said that, when you first start, you actually think about what type of person it is that's going to comment on a video with very few views, no likes, no comments, right? It's probably kind of a weird person who's going to leave that comment, and 90% of the time that's going to be a negative one. So even as a nobody influencer, right, you're attracting kind of the interesting folks, and then as you get bigger and bigger and there's a little bit more traction, I think it gives more credence to your voice. But I love the way that you spun that, Dustin, and it's not even spin, right? It's you have a valiant mission here in terms of, can I even handle it for the greater good? I might steal that because that's pretty good.
Yeah, and consider that it is a curse more than a blessing for the vast majority of people. It seems great, right? I have this audience, I can say cool things and people will listen. You don't necessarily want that. I say a lot of dumb things, and most people don't see it, so I don't have to worry about it. But if you have 1 million followers, every dumb thing you say, there's going to be a lot of people that see it. So I think the key there is community and network, right? So if you have really good friends that you're dialed in with, right? I mean, I really think the fact that the two of you do this podcast together is a superpower. I see people doing solo podcasts, and it's 1,000% harder. I certainly couldn't do this alone. I don't even know how to open a Riverside platform by myself. George and Brandon do all of it. I'm a total boomer. So I actually could not do a podcast without them. I don't say that like facetiously. I actually mean I couldn't do it without, my friends. So that community to back you up when you're having a tough day, and when you post something and your friends text you and immediately say, you need to log out, delete that. You're in a bad headspace, log off of Twitter for a day. That is amazing. That's how you survive this absolute savage Lord of the Flies environment that is X.
Yeah. Mike, talk about your experiences on X.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I wish somebody would tell me every once in a while, Mike, you need to log off for a day or so. You got to have very thick skin on Twitter, I'll put you that much. I mean, that goes with really every platform, unfortunately, because, you enjoy something on Instagram, and, let me go just check out the comments section. It's got 1,000 comments on here. And what is the top one with, 25,000 likes? It's something extremely negative, and anyone who put hard work into that post, that's the thing that they're going to see, is that 25,000 other people agreed with this person saying some really nasty things about you. So
you got to put a hazmat suit on to get into the comment section. That's like an essential.
It's truly, extraordinarily both a curse and a blessing, and I think it really does take special humans to manage that. But I appreciate your pointing out is that you got to have those friends and support groups to be able to lean on, because then otherwise your whole worldview will be shaped, and people get caught up in the audience capture and these are my followers, as if you're Jesus Christ or something, right? No, you got to at the end of the day remember that you're just some popular person on the internet, but in the grand scheme of things, you're just a blip in space and time,
So my first exposure to social media was Facebook, right? You had to have a special account with your university. I'm that old, so boomer book. And you were friends, right? You couldn't even follow someone. You had to mutually connect. So I had to go, all right, Coop, we're going to be friends. And you would accept it, and then we could talk. There was no, I'm just going to follow this person and just be part of their audience. So there's this audience capture didn't exist back then. It was just friends talking. And so the idea of follower or mutuals, I hate. I really, to me, there's this whole don't follow too many people. You have to have 100 people you're following, and then, you have this big audience. I think that's a terrible, and it sets you up to either be a total narcissist or have a mental health breakdown, because you're not connected to these people at that point. If you don't follow someone back, and I know it's a hot take, a lot of people don't like this, but I really think if you don't follow someone back, that's kind of a sign that there's a weird power imbalance, right? So if you're if you're doing it on purpose, right? If you don't know who this person is, they don't interact with you, fine. They're just a follower. It is what it is. But like if you have someone talking to you and you're following them and they're not following you back, that's a power thing. You're kind of the sub and they're the dom. You're like in a dominatrix, kind of environment going on there. So
sadomasochist role, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
You are right, Dustin. Actually, when we were together out in Florida, you said something pretty that resonated with me, and I was like, it's been really hard to build a community because I tweet about news more so and stuff that maybe isn't as engaging for commentary, but I said, I would love to see getting 100, 500 likes on some of these or comments and finding these like opportunities to more so network rather than just kind of blast things out and get that little heart button. And you said, well, you got to make friends one at a time, right? Just like real life. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I literally have to talk to every person. And I will say over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've really made it a point. Anybody who comments or likes or reposts anybody on my page, I will refollow them back. And I actually have been turning on notifications too. And I'm definitely spending too much time on Twitter, but I'm building a lot of legitimate connections. It's kind of crazy how fast it happens. And I really liked what you said as well on tonight, saying, it's not exactly social media. It's networking. And when you think about it too, if you go on my Instagram page, or if you go on maybe I'm the exception because of what I'm about to say, but if you go on an Instagram page, you scroll down and you actually kind of get to know the person because you see what they look like, you see who they are, and you would actually think that you have this really well-rounded idea of who they are. Maybe in some cases you do. But then if you go on someone's Twitter page, it might very well be an anonymous page that you don't even know what they do or who they are. But then as you begin reading and you read their actual engagements and words and thoughts, you in my opinion, you form a much more full picture of who that person is. And it's much more telling. And then you can even search keywords on their account and see what they think about those kind of ideas. And that's very, very different than any other site that you can check.
And I actually think social media has the potential to allow you to connect even more deeply and more meaningfully than in person. So, for example, if I had just met you on the street, I don't know what your pinned post is. I don't know what your banner is, right? But I can click on your profile, and your pinned post probably matters a lot to you. And it says, I think about this. And then I know, okay, here's a really interesting thing about this person that I can connect with, right? I don't have that. I have a t-shirt. Maybe you're wearing a bumper sticker in your car or a t-shirt or something, but otherwise it's going to take me a while to dig in and get some idea of who you are, make a connection, not offend you. Right? I might, who knows what I'm going to say because I don't know who you are. Whereas if you take a second and scroll someone's Twitter page, if you see pronouns, you have to behave a certain way. If you see, a flag, you have somebody. So you have all these hot buttons that you can say, okay, maybe talk about this, connect on this. Definitely don't touch that one. That's going to really make them mad. And boom, easy to make a friend, right? Not so easy in person. So I actually believe that it's easier to make friends on social media than it is in person.
I think an important takeaway, and this is obviously us just justifying the low number of likes and stuff we get on some of our posts, but it's very unfortunate is, Cooper will point out like, oh, do you see this person? Look how fast they grew, or look how big their account is. And then unfortunately, like they have a podcast or they, some sort of weekly content that they push out. And then you go and look at it and you're like, all right, they get thousands of likes on their posts, and then they get 0 watch hours on any of their content. And that's really unfortunate thing because it's very easy to gain a like. But if you can get 25 genuine likes that people leave a comment and they really believe in the stuff that you said, then it makes it all worth it. And it outweighs all of the other negative comments that we get. So the CIA director, one of our best, in terms of view count on the video and stuff like that. But of course, you'll get, about half of the comments are negative ones. But you know what? That's the most engaging stuff that we had. And that's something we got to be proud of because the other half are people who really enjoyed the crap out of it, So you got to take that in stride.
And Mike, there's another part of that though that you kind of touched on is the audience capture factor of that. Is that right on my Twitter right now? If I go over and I tweet that the 2020 election was stolen and they're going to do it again, I swear, I will get that 100 likes because that's what my audience truly believes. And I'm thinking about actually toying with it, and maybe you guys could tell me what you think. I think I'm going to put a post out there or maybe a video of me speaking and say how a lot of my beliefs on election interference has changed in the last year after looking at it after 4 years and being so staunchly thinking that this is what happened, X, Y, and Z, and amassing thousands of followers on X thanks to things that I wrote. I think I'm going to go ahead and change that, and I'm going to as we call the war in Ukraine, a war of attrition with my followers. See if I can outlast them with shooting truth bombs out there. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this kind of forward approach is going to come off more authentic and have a better result in the end? Or is it better to just get huge, succumb to this audience capture, and blast off what your followers want to hear?
Are you a personality-based account or are you an issues-based account? And that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Do you want people to know you as Coop, or do you just want to be like a political account? And they both have value, right? I mean, there are definitely accounts that I follow. I don't care who that person is at all. I just know they have great ideas about crypto, or they have like one thing that I really follow them for. And if they suddenly showing me like pictures of their family, I would be like, I mean, this is cool, but that's not why I follow you. You know, so it kind of depends on what you want to do. In my case, I have kind of a personality-based account. So you have no idea what I'm going to tweet about. I might tell you, you know, a story about the crazy flight nurses, you know, today that helped my daughter. I still can't believe that she wasn't my daughter for 20 minutes. That's the weirdest thing. So when they fly your baby to a NICU at a different hospital, you sign over your custody of the child briefly, and then you get it back when they get back there. So those ladies have had thousands of babies essentially that were theirs briefly. Yeah, you sign custody away because you can't go on the helicopter with them.
Yeah. That's
so
incredible.
I might tell you about that. I might tell you fun facts about anesthesia and where people have put foreign objects they shouldn't be. You know, or I might give you some, I mean, you never know. And that's so fun for me, right? Because it's so random and all over the place. And have I grown slowly and not as many followers as I could have been? Absolutely. Are you supposed to niche down and just talk about a couple things people are really passionate about? Absolutely. Is that fun? Fuck no, it's not fun at all. It's terrible.
Yeah.
That exactly was my point, you know, because I look at a lot of, and especially, you know, what's sent to me algorithmically is I get a lot of these left-leaning accounts, but some of them are just so boring because it's, okay, as soon as any event happens, I already know what they're going to tweet in the next like 5-10 minutes, and then sure enough, that's exactly it, and it's got thousands of likes on it. But again, what do all of those retweets and you know, comments on there really amount to? Because at the end of the day, not that we're trying to monetize anything, but we're trying to get people to watch our content. The long form content, the person that puts their heart and soul what they're producing in there, people don't tune into it. So that 26,000 likes that you have on there is really shallow, and it doesn't mean anything, right? You're just fulfilling this pre-prepared, preconceived notion of something that's not really you. So I definitely agree with you on just saying what you think you should say, you know, and be the personality you want to be.
Yeah, and if your audience's attention is 5 seconds, you're going to lose that audience very quickly. But if you deeply connect with your audience and they're watching your whole boring 4-hour-long horrible elevated thoughts podcast, I mean, they must really like you. There's got to be a reason that they're into that. So
when we see folks watching the full hour, because you know how expensive in terms of attention time 1 hour is today, we're extraordinarily grateful to those folks who do.
Okay, It felt like 4 hours. It was really only an hour. Wow, now I feel bad.
It depends which one you suffered through, Dustin.
You do us the favor of slowing it down by a quarter speed, so it looks like we have better viewing metrics. And we appreciate that.
One of the interesting things we found, honestly, is the niching down is important to build the audience, because when let's talk about a little bit, Dustin, you just got your subscriptions activated this week on X. So recently, I was saying I've been engaging directly more, so I've subscribed to a few accounts. I've been trying to join their subscriber bases, and they all have group chats, or they have different kind of I don't want to call it gimmicks, but gimmicks that they do behind their paywall. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what your plan is with your subscriber base and what you might be offering the group?
Yeah, so mine's a little bit different. I don't really want to make that much. Like, my goal is not to make a lot of money from social media. I have a job that I love, and if I make a few extra bucks doing that, that's great. But the idea for me is that if someone's willing to subscribe to you, that means that they've really tied into what you're doing, and it gives you an opportunity to connect a little bit more deeply. You get their email address. That's probably the best thing about having subscriptions, right? Is that, you know, you can tie them into newsletters, all that kind of stuff. So my goal is to provide really unique and interesting content that doesn't necessarily belong in the main timeline, right? There's some medical stuff that I can talk about. I can take a selfie in the, you know, things like that I wouldn't necessarily blast out to Twitter at large. But if it's 20 subscribers, you know, we can talk about some of that kind of stuff. And that's a really special thing, to have that tight-knit group of people. So for me, we're doing a book club end of the month. We picked Bram Stoker's Dracula. You can get it free on Gutenberg. So we're all going to read Dracula. I may have to delay it a little bit with the baby. Oh, we'll see. I don't know. I'm going to try to still make it work. But
sounds like you got a lot on your plate right
yeah,
now.
I'll talk to the wife. We'll see. But in theory, had we not just had an emergency C-section 8 weeks early, we were going to do a book club over Spaces, which to me, especially in a subscriber-only tiny little Spaces, is a really special, tight-knit, kind of thing to be able to do. Ultimately, there's certain things that belong in the main timeline that anyone can comment on, and then there's things that belong in a tighter space. And I've actually toyed with taking the account totally private for a while, just to kind of see what different things I can do that. But instead, now that subscriptions are open, I can keep the account public and then have a private sort of members only section, where you can talk about some really interesting things. So that's my goal there, is to do kind of inside the OR, really unique medical information, and then book clubs and, a few other things that I want to go that route, versus just like, I'm going to reply to your stuff if you subscribe to me, right? That's kind of, a lot of people are doing that, and that's fine if you're trying to grow. But that's my goal, is to, kind of have the members only area within the subscriptions.
Well, it's pretty cool bringing a book club. I mean, you have this uncanny ability to bring positivity and, good attributes into every attribute and everything. And it's like, it's a little bit foreign to me, Dustin. I got to learn from you, brother. It's a good way to be honest. You make me happy.
So you won me over. You said book club. You just you see my little library behind me there. You may have just earned another subscriber tonight. I got to keep me in the loop on this Bram Stoker.
I hope you join us. Yeah, Dracula's not just a scary guy who drinks blood, right? There's all these themes and tropes behind it, and it's actually really appropriate with the election coming up. So I'm super excited to talk about, what some of that stuff means.
Let's dive into that. So we did mention radical centrism before. I know before we were in the lobby of the podcast here, we were talking about it. Let's talk about politics, and something that a phrase that I share a lot with, and I say is, everything is political. And I don't mean like, we argue about, whether the left or the right. What I mean to say is, in your office, whatever your career, your job, whatever it might be, everything's political, right? You got to know how, like you said, when you approach a person for the first time and you're talking to them, you get to know them, you got to learn those hot button issues of them. That's all politics. Everything in life is politics, and it doesn't have to be in the scheme of the right versus left, but it's all about advancing some sort of action. And I also say that politics is the science of action. Anything you want to get anything done, you got to learn how to maneuver politically to get the pieces and people in place to do it. Does that mean does everything you have to fall into this camp, and I can't be friends with Cooper because we're in different political camps? Absolutely not. So that I like to hear a little bit from you is, how do dads, especially of differing views, how do you make it work? How do you come together and, despite those, form a community of being a good dad first versus your party first?
I think it comes down to never putting ideology ahead of biology or friendship, right? So, I mean, I have friends who've, you voted for Trump, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Or you're going to vote for Harris, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. That's insane, right? Never end a friendship or not talk to Uncle Larry because, he doesn't believe January 6th was, the end of democracy, right? That's okay. You could still be friends with Uncle Larry even if he thinks that, right? Yep. There is nothing... if you think that we need to raise interest rates a quarter point and I think we should lower them, we can still be friends, right? It's not that serious, right? And so I think that's the key to it, is it has to be intellectual in nature, and we can't get offended. And what's happened is we've lionized getting offended. This righteous anger of, I'm offended by what you've said, we've made a virtue when in fact it's a huge vice. Getting offended is a vice. It's a weakness, and it means that you can't separate the emotion from the issue, and that's a weakness. That is 100%. If there's something I have a hard time being friends with someone on the right or the left who gets offended easily. I can't tell a joke. I have to censor what I say. That's not fun, right? That's a huge bummer. So I don't care if you're super liberal or super conservative. If you can take a joke and you can give one back and you can not get offended, then we can be friends, right? We can disagree vehemently. Yeah. But we have to be able to have those ground rules where, hey, we're on a podcast, we're all friends here. I don't think that, I disagree strongly, and I'm actually a little bit upset that you think that, but we're still friends, right? And most of us can't do that. Most Americans have gotten away from that, and I don't know if we've been manipulated or it's just the nature of how things have moved. The Overton window has shrunk, right? What is the Overton window? Everything you can talk about without people getting offended. There's literally a term for that, right? So the wider the Overton window is, the happier I am as a dad. And so as dads, what do we care about? We care about barbecue, we care about sports, we care about fun things, and we can talk about these things while we're doing those activities. So for me, my friendships are activity-based generally. We podcast together, we play pickleball together, we cook together, whatever it is. You know, our friendship is not based on our ideology, it's based on activities. And so that's the real key for me is if crazy Uncle Larry is barbecuing with me and he makes a mean steak and he's crazy, I'm still going to eat his steak and I really don't care. I'm going to laugh about it. And I might respect him a little bit less. I'll admit that. If he has really crazy ideas, I'm going to go respect him a little bit less. But does it make his steak any less delicious? It certainly doesn't, and I'm still going to eat it.
Why is the fat on this steak all yellow, Uncle Larry? It pairs well with Chianti.
That's right.
What we have is a social media speed scrolling click economy that is monetized through fear porn. And what I think if you were to ask a Gen Z or my kid's too young to ask him what he thinks about the government at 1 year old, but I think that what we need to remind people is that this is a robust system of checks and balances. One of the number one hot button issues in this election is abortion. I honestly believe that nothing is going to change with the abortion legislation over the next 4 years. I truly believe that. They're not going to codify Roe, and they're not going to friggin' make abortion outlawed. So what are we talking about? Let's not talk about it. How about that? We don't have to, right? I mean...
That would be very convenient for the Republicans because it's the top Democrat issue. So, I mean,
but they're not going to get it. Mike, how do they get it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what they're probably counting on is an extraordinarily strong blue wave coming, this election cycle. But short of that, you're 100% right. As pragmatically speaking, there isn't a route to there. And this speaks to one of the episodes we did of political theater, right? So up until recently, the abortion issue was the Republican fundraising, gem. This was what's going to get money and or votes at the booth, and now it's kind of amazing how in a single election cycle that has flipped entirely. And down here, you're a fellow Floridian. I'm sure you see it all the time. The commercials for amendment, I believe it's 3, was it right?
4 is the abortion amendment.
4 is the abortion amendment.
3 is pot, I think.
Either way, both of them are perfect examples. You always see vote yes commercial on either amendment, and then immediately following is another vote no commercial right after. And
they're both very convincing. I'm like, I need to really read into this. They're both great ads.
Both these special interest groups are going around the clock to make the issue as obtuse as possible for you. And I think that's why it's so important is to not get so married into the politics and the emotion of it. Because when you look at these commercials, they are extraordinarily emotional. They're supposed to make you angry either way. Yeah. And it's fine when maybe it was just a little bit, but when you look everywhere is, you got to get people angry because it activates them to go out and participate in this type of activism, or it gets them to vote and it gets them to watch this type of TV show, even if you watch, I call it not reality TV, but surreality TV because it's completely fabricated.
Like
people love to hate watch it, right? Because at the end of the day, we're like, look at these pieces of crap. I've got it so much better than they do, right? Is that healthy? Probably not. So I think long term we need to start moving away from those things.
Agreed. Yeah, as much as we can remove the emotion from the issues, we're all winning in that kind of environment. But it's very hard to, right? I mean, I'm a big Dallas Cowboys fan, right? I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that right now because we're so bad this year. But if a referee calls a play that is probably totally fair, but it goes against my team, I'm going to be mad about it, right? And if something I totally didn't deserve, there's like some weak penalty that doesn't count, goes in our favor, I'm like, yeah, let's go. And it's the exact same in political parties. And when I realized that, when people start saying that the ends justify the means, we have a lot of problems, right? I've talked to friends on the left about this. I'm like, hey, I didn't really like that Kamala Harris got coronated. I wanted to have some choices. I wanted to be able to pick Andrew Yang. Yang Gang, let's go. I like that dude. Ranked choice voting, he's awesome.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but she's better than Trump, so we still have to support her. And I was like, no, I don't like that. No, no, I don't like that at all. And then the guys on the right, same thing, are like, this certain example where something kind of was a little under the table, but it's fine because Kamala Harris is going to end free speech, and so we still have to support Trump. And I'm like, no, I don't like that either. We need to stop just supporting our team and allowing those 15-yard penalties to go against people. We need to call the refs on it and say, hey, that's BS. that wasn't defensive holding.
It's a great metaphor, though, because, right, that's exactly what we don't have. We don't have a system of penalties for this kind of malfeasance by politicians. I guess the argument would be, oh, you vote with your opinions and you vote them out of office. But yeah, if they're on day one and they do something absolutely terrible, there really is like no repercussions. And we were joking last week on the episode, and maybe I wasn't joking, but this I forget his name, but the mob boss of the longshoremen union, right? He came out, he goes, I'm going to cripple the economy. They negotiated with this guy in good faith. Like, they should have taken this guy to jail. He's threatened the whole country, the whole world economy. Take the guy to jail. That's not allowed. You know what I mean?
It's a bad dude. Yeah.
Right. And what did they do in the end? I don't know if people even know this. The strike was lifted in like 4 days, and they agreed to renegotiate it in the end of January 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonder what's going to happen in January 20th, 2025.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Conveniently timed.
Yeah. Yeah. But, DeSantis also sent in the National Guard and said, we're going to have the guardsmen do the job of the strikers. And then magically it was fixed like 2 hours later. So might have been a timing issue, or it might have just been like, oh, wow, maybe the National Guardsmen can do longshoreman jobs and we can actually make this happen. So
this is no longer politically expedient to keep up the strike. That's how it usually goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess longshoreman is one of those jobs that's traditionally masculine. I bet you there's not very many women in it. And Mike and I, we both work in traditionally masculine roles as well, in kind of this blue collar job. It's definitely been an interesting thing to see as we stay on this politics theme, that kind of blue collar middle class has almost shifted to become more right leaning as opposed to left leaning. And Dustin, when we were setting up for this show, we had kind of said there was something you wanted to reveal to Mike about maybe how you'd voted in the past, and talk about some of how you have kind of broken from tradition, because you're one of those examples that maybe the Trump campaign would love to highlight, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I've broken from tradition. I fully expect to vote Democrat again in 2028. I voted for Obama, Hillary Clinton. I voted for Biden. I don't think I've ever voted for a Republican in any election ever. I went to the first like gay wedding ever in like 2008 up in Connecticut. My like personal hero, and the reason I got into anesthesia, had been dating his boyfriend for like 20 years, wanted to get married. The moment he was able to get married, they went. I mean, I've always considered myself very progressive. And it hurts my heart to see the direction that the the current, route the Democratic Party has gone. And I think it's going to be fixed. I think they're going to lose, and it's going to be repudiated, the mistakes that they've made, some of the excesses on the left. And I can go back to voting Democrat again in 2028 like I have done my entire life. That may not happen. I really don't care. I'm happy to be a Republican for 10 years. I'm happy to be a Democrat for 10 years. Again, I'm an issue-based voter, and I respect people who are willing to vote outside of their party, right? So I'm not excited to vote for Donald Trump, but I will, because him as president is safer for my son and for my daughter than Kamala Harris as president. I genuinely believe that. And people might disagree with me, and I respect that in good faith. But I think for me, foreign policy is the number one issue we need to be voting on right now. That's the main thing that a president can affect. And I genuinely believe that our military-industrial complex right now is sending us on a path to World War III and potentially ending my son's chance to live a good life. And Donald Trump is kind of crazy, and he might do something I don't like either, but the risk of him pushing that red button is materially lower than someone within the Harris administration doing it. And so that's really my one hot button issue, is I don't want someone pushing the hot button and blowing up the world. It's as simple as that. So that's where I'm at.
So I would say that I do disagree. I do think that she's less likely, but that's not to say that they're not willing to go to very far means to, teach Russia a lesson, or they have more chops to prove, right? Obviously, she has a lot of doubt, so she might feel more, she might feel more backed into a corner where I have to respond strongly, otherwise I'm going to be criticized as being weak on China, or weak, in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. So I do kind of actually understand your position there, but what I think is kind of interesting is your story. I know a lot of Democrats, right? We're not very pleased with the candidate. I know that there's a lot of, it's the writing in between the lines there, that even those who are voting Democrat this election, it's going to be if they don't win, it's going to be a real big challenge for them over the next 2 to 4 years as they go through the postmortem, because your traditional Democratic voting base is not in alignment with the party anymore. They took advantage of, oh, this is the very progressive, swell that we're going to ride here, but those folks don't show up at the voting booth. They aren't as committed to the community actions as their online personas would make them believe. And it's funny to see in such a short amount of time the Democratic Party, which used to be the party of either the union or the blue collar worker, and now you see something like, I forget which union it was, but nearly half or more of their entire base said that they're probably voting for Donald Trump. That
Teamsters.
should be the Teamsters was the Teamsters union. I didn't want to misspeak, but that really does speak to the weaknesses in the Democratic Party, and really should be a wake-up call for them that they're very much out of alignment with their core voting base. So your concerns are appreciated and heard and shared amongst many other Democratic voters. So it's something they're going to have to deal with.
I remember what I was going to say before, and it was that in last week's episode, we actually covered a statistic, Dustin. You are in the minority here, prioritizing foreign affairs over domestic, where 20% of Americans say that they prioritize foreign affairs, whereas 60% are prioritizing, almost an exact split, domestic affairs, the border, and the economy. So you are one of maybe that's an indication that it's a more informed thing. I always say that people who are active on X or active on Twitter, I feel like you are among the most top 1% engaged political folk if you're active on X, because you know that you're partaking and reading in both sides of this information and you're commenting and engaging. So it's very interesting to hear you say that. It's probably what I'm gauging my vote on as well. And it goes back to what I said about checks and balances. Just not so much is going to change, but a lot of things could change over there. And it's really important. But yeah, I guess your point about the military industrial complex and Kamala about to hit a red button or her administration is very interesting. It's something that Mike and I talk about a lot, how Russia is almost being snubbed in a diplomatic way, where we're not even engaging in a conversation so much. Biden hasn't even been to Russia since his whole term has started, or spoken with him, I'm pretty sure. And that's very scary, right? That's just not what I see as president. They describe Trump as not very statesmanly, but how is it? It's not statesmanly to avoid your enemies and label them a supervillain either. Mike and I spoke with Professor Radchenko, right? And he spoke how the Soviets and the Russians always wanted to be legitimized as a nation or as a superpower. And the Americans have always kind of said, get out of here. You're not that important. And that's essentially what we've been doing for years now.
That's kind of on the Russians. I mean, ever since Gorbachev did that Pizza Hut commercial, come on, we totally owned him.
It's all been downhill since there.
Yeah, exactly. He never should have done that.
It's so funny that you brought up that example, because it actually is in the book too, where he tries to think of this is going to legitimize me. I'm going to be in this commercial for this international brand, and it did not play well domestically at all. He was lampooned for it, and even it sunk his ratings even further after that.
It was a really cute commercial, but it was it was not
very out of place.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, in my opinion, what we've done is we've legitimized them the other way, right? We've shown that we are frightened of them and we are scared of them. And actually what we just saw a few days ago is now North Korean troops are landing on the ground in Ukraine. And that's a significant escalation as well. So that's kind of scary. Although what I wrote was watching the North Koreans get off of a plane into Ukraine is like watching clowns unpack from a clown car with their squeaky shoes and little horns. I don't know that they're going to really be able to do much, but hey, that's definitely an escalation. And I think that people that, NATO countries are watching this happen, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's really it's scary to see these massive alliances between countries, right? I mean, the last time we saw 50 countries take on 50 countries, nuclear weapons did not exist, right? And now they do. So, mutually assured destruction has been wonderful for the past 50 years, but it works when there's 4 countries with nukes, right? Now there's 20, and there's probably going to be 50 soon, right? Because they're easier and easier to create. So at some point, you can't expect rational behavior from 50 different actors. Right. And so mutually assured destruction breaks down, and we're going to be in a lot of trouble. It takes one crazy person to, create a lot of problems. So I'm a big fan of Reagan. Could have done it way back in the day. He wanted a Star Wars program. Never happened, right? Let's make it happen with Anduril, or what Star Wars program is the shoot nukes out of the sky.
Okay,
kind of
okay.
So it's possible to do. There's a couple different companies working on it. I'd love to see SpaceX or Anduril, create a nuclear bomb defense system. I think it's possible, and it may, potentially change the nature of geopolitics in a positive way. So we'll see how that plays out.
Interesting.
An interesting thing I would like to highlight is that the nature of warfare has changed from what we've seen, what's going on in Ukraine-Russia conflict. And what would be really interesting is the impact of drones on the battlefield now. Because what used to be this armored vehicle or tank or even aircraft now could be undermined by a cottage industry drone. And now you talk about swarm drone armies and what that's going to change the face of the battlefield. So it's kind of interesting, the nature of things and how fast they're changing. To the point of nuclear weapons, right? Before even we had nuclear weapons, right? We didn't have AI. These things are making a lot of decisions on a lot of levels that a human is only looking at and cross-referencing and verifying for maybe 10 seconds at a time, and the AI has made a decision to it. But if you leave AIs in a kind of game theory situation, they always escalate and go to nuclear war way too fast compared to what humans have historically done, thankfully.
Yeah. So that's a great point. And so that is a real risk, that we don't even blow up the world in accident. It's just an AI that goes haywire. It does. Yeah. I mean, that was the plot to Terminator.
I was just going to say that real Terminator, there is a company called Skynet. I don't know why anybody let that happen. There should have been a law made against being a real Skynet company, but it's out there. That's the really terrifying thing about it.
Well, Elon just hosted the Wii robot, and it looks like exactly out of iRobot. The name, the look of the Optimus bot, the toaster-looking truck. It was like, oh my God, he copied the movie. Hopefully he didn't copy the end of the movie. So... Hey, Dustin, we've been going for an hour already, believe it or not. I couldn't be more grateful for your time here. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us, or maybe you could just tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, come find me on Twitter at Dustin the Dad, or check out the Present Fathers podcast. We're on every platform, Spotify, YouTube, and of course we post all of our episodes on X as well. So feel free to check us out.
Awesome, man. Well, we were really grateful to have you again. We'll definitely keep on your timeline so we know what's going on with the new baby. Congratulations again. We love you very much, man. And this has been Elevated Thoughts.